This man's upper body was human, but his lower body had turned into spider-like legs. He had only been stung by a beetle, yet he became a horrifying human-insect hybrid. A giant beetle crawled onto a man's face, which was wrapped in heavy webbing, and a thick black tube forced itself into his mouth. The next second, disgusting green liquid leaked out. So what had happened to him? Earlier that morning, Cooper was a lazy telemarketer who often showed up late and annoyed customers. His boss Maureen finally had enough and decided to fire him. Right as she said it, a sharp ringing sound filled the air. Both of them clutched their heads in pain and passed out. When Cooper woke up, he found himself wrapped tightly in spider-like threads. His co-workers were trapped the same way. Before he understood what was happening, a gigantic beetle-like creature lunged at him. Cooper struggled with all his strength. The beetle was quick and hard to deal with. After a close fight, he used a paper cutter to slice off one of the beetle's legs. The injured bug fled. Cooper then freed Maureen. She remembered her daughter Sarah was still in the car outside. Maureen ignored his warning and ran out to find help. The entire city seemed to be under attack by giant beetles. Cooper also ran outside and found Sarah unconscious, trapped in webbing in her car. He woke her up, but Sarah panicked and thought he was some kind of creep. She sprayed him with pepper spray. As they argued, a giant beetle dropped from the sky and carried Maureen away. Before Cooper and Sarah could react, more beetles crawled toward them. They ran for their lives. Cooper accidentally kicked over a trash can, and the beetles attacked the trash instead. Their eyesight was very poor and they hunted by sound. Sarah quickly pressed the car alarm, using the noise to distract the insects. They escaped into a nearby cafe. They woke the staff and customers, and everyone began discussing what to do. Some wanted to stay and wait for rescue, but others refused to sit and wait for death. Albert said he had a large truck outside and could take everyone with him. Sarah argued the engine noise would attract beetles and make it too dangerous. In the end, only PJ and Roger decided to go. They drove down the street, crushing any beetles in their way. Just as they celebrated, a giant beetle burst through the windshield and began fighting Roger inside the truck. PJ panicked and jumped out of the moving truck and broke his leg. Roger was carried high into the air by the beetle. The truck lost control and ran over PJ, killing him instantly. A police officer tried to save Roger by shooting the beetle, but Roger fell and died. The beetles on the ground swarmed the officer and overwhelmed him immediately. Hugo wanted to help, but his father, Albert, held him back. At that moment, a beetle quietly flew behind Albert and stung him. The outside world was too dangerous, so the 6 survivors hurried back into the building. Besides Sarah, Cooper, and Albert, with his son Hugo, there were also Cindy and Lychee. Sarah, being a doctor, immediately checked Albert's wound. Since the stinger hadn't hit his spine, his condition wasn't too serious. The group climbed up to the rooftop. The city in the distance was covered in thick, rising red smoke, and on the other side, swarms of dark beetles hovered in the sky. Cindy suggested going to the nearest military airbase, where soldiers might still be holding the line. Cooper's father, Ethan, was a retired soldier who had built a survival bunker long ago because he believed in doomsday scenarios. Coincidentally, they would pass by the bunker on the way to the airbase. Cooper suggested stopping there first to pick up supplies. While they discussed the plan, several giant beetles flew toward them. Lychee waved her hand in silence and confirmed that these beetles were practically blind. As long as they made no noise, they would remain safe. With the insect's weakness confirmed, Lychee came up with a bold idea. They would catch a beetle and analyze the chemicals in its venom. Using a radio to play loud static, they successfully lured one beetle in. Through careful teamwork, they trapped it and extracted its venom. Lychee discovered that the venom contained a protein that acted as a strong anesthetic. Anyone affected would quickly fall unconscious. She guessed that the red smoke in the sky was some kind of gas the beetles breathed out, but she couldn't confirm what it was yet. That night, they took turns keeping watch. When it was Cooper's turn, Cindy quietly approached him. She was a weather reporter and wanted Cooper to escort her to the TV station, which was connected to global communication satellites. But Cooper didn't want to abandon the group. Cindy began to cry and even tried to seduce him. However, Cooper actually liked Sarah, so he immediately backed away, afraid Sarah might misunderstand. At sunrise, Lychee decided to stay behind to wake more survivors, while the other 5 continued the journey. Because the route was long, they chose to stop by their homes first. They went to Albert's house. Unfortunately, Albert's sick wife had already died in bed, but there was no time to grieve. Albert forced himself to stay strong, took a hunting rifle, and they moved on. Next, they reached the large villa where Cindy's brother Chad lived. People in the neighboring house, as well as Chad's wife, had all been wrapped tightly in webbing like cocoons, but the real shock was still ahead. Chad had mutated into a six-limbed monster and walked out of the garage holding a human-sized cocoon. The moment he appeared, he killed his own wife. Sarah was thrown far away by one powerful strike. Chad no longer recognized Cindy and pulled her close while letting out a deafening roar. Cooper tried to save her, but failed, and his thigh was pierced by the monster. In the critical moment, Hugo grabbed a steel pitchfork and stabbed the monster. Albert quickly climbed up to help. The father and son used all their strength and finally managed to kill the creature. Night fell, and the group decided to spend the night in the villa. While treating wounds, Cooper told Sarah that if he ever turned into a monster like Chad, she should pretend she didn't see him instead of shooting him. Even though he sounded timid, Sarah knew from today's events that he was actually dependable and brave. They continued talking, and the distance between them grew much closer. Meanwhile, Cindy was devastated by her brother's death. Albert heard her crying, but he did not go into the room to comfort her. He went to the bathroom instead. At this point, his body was already showing abnormal changes. It was obvious that he was beginning to mutate. Worried that he would cause trouble for the group, he hid the truth when Sarah tried to check on him. Late at night, Cindy started acting up again. She told Cooper that her brother had died, and she wanted him to comfort her. Then she suddenly took off her clothes. Her sudden advance caught Cooper off guard, but in the end he resisted and kept his boundaries. The next day, the group continued on their journey. On the road, a few beetles flew overhead. Everything seemed fine, until Cindy saw Cooper and Sarah holding hands. She flew into a jealous rage and screamed loudly, attracting a nearby swarm. To protect the group, Albert decisively shot Cindy dead. The gunshot was extremely loud, and it drew even more beetles toward them. Albert shot two of them, but then one flying beetle grabbed him. Cooper picked up the fallen shotgun and managed to shoot the beetle down. Hugo ran as fast as he could and caught Albert before he hit the ground. At this point, they were out of bullets. Cooper was pinned under another beetle. Sarah kicked the insect to help him, but she ended up putting herself in danger. The beetle grabbed Sarah and flew toward the source of the red smoke, the beetle nest. Now the group was reduced to only Albert, Hugo, and Cooper. After who knows how long of walking, the three of them finally reached Cooper's father Ethan's house. By nightfall, Albert's condition became much worse. He lost his appetite, and his teeth began to fall out. Cooper and Ethan argued about where to go next. Cooper wanted to return to the city to rescue Sarah. Ethan insisted on heading to the airbase. Neither of them noticed that Albert was changing rapidly. Soon, he would become a horrifying hybrid creature. Albert let out a painful scream. Only then did the father and son realize something was wrong. 6 sharp limbs burst out from Albert's body. Cooper tried to reach him, but Albert had already lost all reason. As the creature grabbed Cooper, Ethan tried to shoot it, but Hugo grabbed the pistol, unable to see his father shot. Seeing Cooper suffering in that monstrous form, Hugo made the hard decision. He shot his father, ending his life. But the gunshot attracted another giant beetle. It smashed through the window. Ethan quickly grabbed a stun gun from the drawer. Cooper and Hugo each took up a melee weapon and stood on either side of Ethan. To their surprise, the electric shock worked perfectly. The beetle convulsed violently and exploded on the spot. One problem ended, and another one immediately followed. When they came into the living room, they discovered that Ethan's pet dog had mutated as well. Ethan couldn't bring himself to hurt it, so he distracted the dog with a toy and led it away. But the gunshots had already attracted more beetles, so the three of them had no choice but to hide inside the underground bunker. They decided to wait until morning to make a new plan. Luckily, at dawn, the beetles had already left on their own. The 3 survivors gathered in the kitchen to have breakfast. Ethan spoke to Cooper in a commanding tone, not a negotiating one, and told him that they would head to the airbase as soon as they finished eating. Cooper was furious. He had never done anything meaningful in his life, and if he couldn't even save the girl he loved, then what kind of man was he? Ethan was slightly proud of Cooper's growth, but he knew that if Cooper went alone into the beetle nest, he would almost certainly die. However, Cooper had become a devoted lover, and once he decided, no one could change his mind. Ignoring Ethan and Hugo, he left by himself. But plans never kept up with reality. Cooper hadn't gotten far before an armed officer spotted him. Believing he was infected, they dragged him to the police station and locked him up. An old man was locked in the same cell. He explained that 2 days earlier, he had tried to escape the city but had been captured by the same armed group. The old man knew Lychee. He confirmed that she had awakened many survivors, and that she and a biologist had even captured 2 flying beetles. However, no one realized the beetle's gas was extremely flammable. The entire shelter exploded, and the old man was the only survivor. Meanwhile, Ethan and Hugo, who had been trying to catch up with Cooper, were also captured and brought in. Cooper told them not to panic. There was a simple way to check who would mutate. Just inspect the back. If there was no stinger wound, there would be no mutation. But Ethan had been injured on the road, and the wound looked exactly like Albert's. Ethan moved quickly. He grabbed a female officer and held her hostage, demanding the keys. Just as Cooper was about to grab them, the woman fought back and threw Ethan to the ground. She raised her rifle, ready to shoot him, but at that moment, the old man mutated. Sharp claws burst from his body, and he stabbed the woman through the neck. Ethan managed to deal with the remaining officers, and the three of them escaped, taking weapons and useful supplies, including explosives. They rode bicycles toward the beetle nest. However, the nest was far larger than expected. On the way, Ethan's body continued to mutate. His time was running out. Cooper noticed Ethan was in pain and went to check on him, but Ethan suddenly handcuffed Cooper to a tree. He also knocked Hugo unconscious with the gun stock. Before leaving, Ethan placed the key within their reach.
I love you.
Meanwhile, Sarah woke up inside the nest. The area was filled with human-sized cocoons. Beetles constantly carried new victims deeper inside to feed the queen. Sarah also saw a mutated child. The scene was horrifying. Like the beetles, the child's vision was gone, and it relied entirely on sound. Sarah held her breath and avoided detection. Ethan reached the nest and found Sarah. The two of them decided to use explosives to kill the queen. On the other side, Cooper freed himself from the cuffs. Cooper and Hugo followed the tunnels and finally reached the nest. The cave was pitch black and terrifying, and the ceiling was crawling with countless beetles. The sight made them stumble back in fear and collapse to the ground. Only then did they notice that the floor was covered in round eggs, and small beetles were hatching everywhere. Ethan and Sarah located the queen. As they set the explosives, Ethan told Sarah to leave and let him finish the job alone. A strange sound echoed above them. They looked up and saw the queen, several times larger than any beetle they had seen. Ethan fired at her, but bullets had no effect. The queen charged forward, putting Ethan and Sarah in grave danger. At the critical moment, Cooper and Hugo arrived after hearing the gunfire. They opened fire together. The queen let out a deafening screech. Everyone covered their ears, except Hugo, who was deaf. Hugo grabbed a pack of explosives and threw it straight into the queen's mouth. Ethan told them to run, and he stayed behind to detonate the charge. But right at that moment, Ethan fully mutated. Cooper had no choice but to go back for him. To make things worse, the detonator had no battery. Thankfully, Cooper found one in his flashlight. At the last possible second, Cooper activated the detonator. The explosion was massive. The queen and all her offspring were reduced to ashes.
Look!
Whoa.
Holy shit.